Hey everybody, welcome to Broadreach from home. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. If you're coming back for more, thanks for coming back. We're excited everybody's here today. My name is Virginia. I work at the Broadreach headquarters office, and we are really excited to be able to bring some of our instructors into your homes, even in these strange times. Today, Elana is going to share with us about some strange sharks, hopefully building on what Lindsay taught us earlier this week. If you didn't have a chance to check hers out, we'll be sending out the recording on Monday. But just a reminder to keep your mics off. There are a bunch of us in this room, and it helps keep things moving forward. But if you have questions, throw them in the chat box. We love to see those. Alana's going to try to get to those if she can, and if not, I'll copy them and we'll get to them at the end. But interact with us, turn your cameras on. It's awesome to see who's here and actually feel like you're in the room with us. Or if you're more comfortable with it off, that's fine too. But we're excited that you're here. And Elana, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Virginia, for the introduction. You guys, I am so excited to share this talk with you. I've been working on it for the past couple of weeks, and I've kind of been gathering knowledge here and there and kind of putting it in, and I've been really, really, really excited about it. So before we kind of jump into introducing all of the really fun new cartilaginous friends that I have gathered for you, I want to do a little bit of science housekeeping. So one thing, probably the thing I love most about science, is that it is the pursuit of knowledge, and you are constantly learning and constantly looking for more information. So that's why I do it, because I love learning and I love teaching. And so this is kind of like the best thing possible for me. And before we get into learning about these sharks, I want to go through a little bit of science. So it's really important, especially these days, to kind of have a full picture, bigger picture, full story kind of idea of what you're talking about. So I want to give all of the information I possibly can, and then you guys can take that information and tell your friends and tell your family and kind of get the good word on sharks out there. All right. So I first want to talk about Latin names. So there are Latin names for species and there are common names for species. And Latin names are really important because they're kind of this universal name that anyone in any language uses for one particular species. And my favorite example of this is this gorgeous girl right here, Carcharias taurus. Now, that is her Latin name. It's always italicized. It shows the genus and the species. The genus is the first word, always capitalized. Species is lowercase, and it's always a second word. But we always want to use the Latin name with it because, well, my favorite example is this shark because she is called sand tiger shark, gray nurse shark, ragged-tooth shark, spotted ragged-tooth shark. You guys get the idea, right? And these are all the common names just in English. Like there are other languages that also have names for this shark. So it's always important to have the Latin name there. All right. So I see a few of you here that were here for Lindsay's talk on Monday. Can any of you guys in the chat guess or tell me around how many species of shark there are? I'll give you guys about 10, 15 seconds. All right. Excellent. You guys are really on top of it. So the correct answer is there is about, and there are over 500 species of shark, which is a lot. So our wonderful sand tiger shark is aghast at how many close and distant cousins it has. And I just want to kind of tell you about some of these wacky and weird sharks that you've probably never heard of. I mean, I had never really heard of a lot of these sharks, but the reason we say over 500 species of shark is because there isn't an exact number. And that's because scientists are discovering new shark species every year. I mean, even within the last 5 or so years, I I group myself into the larger category of shark scientists, have discovered new species. And this is just a small subset of the actual number of species that have been discovered since 2015. And you might ask, how do you discover a new species? I want to discover a new species. And the reason we're also discovering new species is because most of them live in the deep ocean. And we don't really have a lot of access to the deep ocean. We cannot breathe underwater yet. I'm waiting for that. But it's really difficult for us to get down there and look at everything that the bottom of the ocean has to offer. So a lot of these come from the deep ocean. Sometimes, occasionally, these are discovered through fishing, directly fishermen or scientists fishing for sharks. More recently, like in the last 10 years, some shark species have been, quote unquote, discovered because of looking at their genomes, looking at their DNA. So there's a species of hammerhead shark called the Carolina hammerhead off the coast of North and South Carolina. People thought it was a great hammerhead because it looks exactly like a great hammerhead. But when they looked at the genes and the DNA, they discovered that it was actually a completely different species. So even though the morphology or the outside appearance of the shark was almost identical, looking at the genes can really tell us that there are other species out there. And then the last way that scientists can discover a new shark species is they will actually go to international fish markets and go look through all of the fish that has been brought in by the fishermen. A lot of times these fishermen are doing really deep, long line fishing or bottom trawling where they drag a net on the back of the boat along the bottom. And that's not really specified. The net doesn't discriminate in what it brings up. So it's dragging along the bottom and then it brings everything up to the surface. And so they're just kind of stuck with whatever they've brought up in their net. And so a lot of the times, like most of these species on the screen here, those have been found at international fish markets. All right, so we know there are 500, there's no tiger shark, Kelsey, so don't worry, we are exactly where we need to be. So we know that there are 500 species of shark. The smallest shark is the dwarf Lanternshark, and it grows to a whopping 6 inches when it is a mature adult. And if anyone in the chat box can tell me what the biggest shark is, I'll give you guys about 10 seconds to pop it in the chat box. Roan, yes. Whale shark. The whale shark is the biggest shark. Good job, guys. So you can see between 6 inches and 18 to 16 feet, which is 216 to 720 inches, that is a big difference, right? It's so big that we even have charts showing how big it is, right? So these ones over here at the top, these are your general adult mature whale sharks. This one at the top here says very large adult. Only one has ever been discovered to be that large. So we generally go with between 9 and 12 meters. That's around these two. But look how small a human scuba diver is right next to a whale shark. So there is a very, very, very wide range of shark sizes. And something I want to note before we move on is I will be showing some photos of people holding sharks or next to sharks. And I do not condone touching wild animals. Please do not touch or bother or pet wild animals. The only reason I have those photos on my slides is because it gives a really good indicator of size with respect to humans. So that is the only reason you will see any photos on any of my slides of people holding sharks. All right, one last thing, I promise, before we get into the actual sharks, is I want to introduce you to something called the IUCN Red List. The IUCN is the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and they kind of have this comprehensive global database on extinction risk status for plants, animals, and fungi, right? So they go out and they gather data and they put it all into this database, and it's kind of an indicator for the health of global biodiversity. And so they give each species that they evaluate a rank, right? And it's kind of like a grade you would get in your class. So this is what the ranking system looks like. So you have not evaluated and data deficient in the gray. Now, data deficient is kind of a tricky rank because, for example, the nurse shark, which is really, really, really common in Florida and the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, there's a huge population there, and we know a lot about them. But there's also a population on the western coast of the United States and South America, and we don't really know enough about that population. So, strangely, nurse sharks are considered data deficient just because they don't have enough information on that Pacific population to really give an over-encompassing grade for that species. Moving on. Other ranks are least concerned, near threatened, vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered, extinct in the wild, and extinct. And these three are your high risk categories. So if there is a species in that category, it is something that you should be paying attention to. Extinct in the wild, it can mean a couple of different things. So it just means that there aren't any living animals of that species in the wild. They might be in captivity, or they could be functionally extinct. So there has to be a certain number of mature individuals in order to repopulate and kind of maintain a population. If it drops below that number, they're functionally extinct. So they could be considered extinct. All right, so the IUCN Red List is not list with a grade, right? It's also considered a policy and conservation tool that government agencies, wildlife departments, NGOs, nature resource centers, education outlets, all of them use the IUCN Red List as a policy and conservation tool. And this kind of guides and informs future conservation and funding priorities by identifying key sites or habitats or species that need the most protection. So this is a really, really valuable tool. If you guys are interested in becoming biologists or like wildlife biologists, this is something you will likely be using in the future. I suggest checking out the website and learning more about any of your favorite species. All right, finally, as promised, we're gonna start learning about our new cartilaginous friends. I'm so excited. All right, so we are gonna start off with the angular rough shark. And I love this species so much. They just have the sweetest face, and the first time I ever saw them, I just fell in love. I think they're so cool. They can grow about to a maximum of 5 feet, but they're usually a little smaller than that, somewhere around 3 feet. And I'm sure you've noticed, but I think one of the coolest parts of them is their body is shaped like a triangle. If you take a cross section, it looks like a triangle. And scientists are actually not really sure why it is shaped like that, but maybe they were born this way, right? They love eating worms and crustaceans and mollusks. And you can see on the map, I'm gonna have a map on every slide in the bottom right-hand corner. That's gonna show their geographic range. So in the orangish, brownish color, that is where they live in the world. So they're all along the western coast of Africa and Europe and the Mediterranean. And they actually live pretty deep down usually. So they're between 60 and 600 meters. In feet, that's 200 to about 2,000 feet. And something I'm going to also include with each slide is their IUCN Red List status. So they are vulnerable. Up here at the top, you can see that. And that's because they have some threats. They can be caught as bycatch in bottom trawls, gill nets, and long lines. And bycatch just means that they were not the intended target. So if someone is fishing for tuna on a really long line and they catch a shark, they weren't intending to catch for a shark, so it's considered bycatch. And in the Mediterranean, there was a 2005 ban on bottom trawling below 1,000 meters, but it doesn't really apply to this species because their maximum depth is about 600 to 650 meters, but sometimes that's all you can do. All right, so moving on. The Speartooth Shark. Now, I'm sure you guys can immediately guess why they're called the Speartooth Shark. You can see their bottom jaw over here in this photograph, and their teeth that stick out look like spears. An appropriate name, right? Now, they can grow up to, they can be about 8.5 feet long at their biggest. And this photo in the middle here is someone holding a juvenile. And then this one down in the left-hand corner, that is what an adult looks like. Now, something very interesting, I would like you guys to check out the map. If we go back to the angular rough shark, right, we can see that the range is on the coastline. But if you look at the Speartooth shark, their range is within the border of the countries. That can only mean one thing. They are a species of river shark. How cool is that? There are only 4 living species of river shark, and the Speartooth shark is one of them. I just think that is so cool. So that means they can tolerate a very wide range of salinities. So they live inland and river in less salty water, more fresh water. And then they also live kind of by river mouths, and that is in kind of partially salty, partially fresh water, and that's called brackish water. Now, it is very difficult to maintain your internal body condition. So, right, we have water and salts in our body, and the outside is water and salts. And so it takes a lot of energy to maintain an internal environment. So with them being able to go into fresh water and then salty water and fresh water, that costs a lot of energy. This process of maintaining your internal body environment is called osmoregulation. And so that's a very energetically costly thing to do all the time, especially if you're going from fresher water to saltier water. So this causes them to not be very active predators in order to conserve energy. So they move up the stream when the tidal current goes up, and then they move down the stream when the tidal current goes down. So they literally go with the flow, right? So this conserves energy and allows them to be able to go within these different salinity waters. They are also adapted to hunt primarily in the dark. As you can see in this photo over here at the bottom left, they live in a pretty dark environment. You know, rivers aren't necessarily the clear waters of the Caribbean, right? So they have very tiny eyes in comparison to their body size, but they have an enhanced set of other senses called electroreception, which allow them to detect the movement of water and ions in the water. So like salts in the water if a fish is moving, and they can detect that with an organ on their snout. So decreased eyesight, elevated electroreception. All right. So they unfortunately are considered endangered. They're sometimes incidentally captured by commercial and recreational fishing, but there's kind of a reason why they're considered endangered is because they are very picky, right? They only want to live in a very, very, very certain kind of habitat. And so that kind of makes them susceptible to pressures that sharks like the mako shark that can live in pretty much any open ocean environment, those kind of pressures like habitat degradation or river pollution really affects them a little bit more than other sharks. So that's why they are considered endangered. All right. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, they're endangered. They live in such small habitats. There are only about 2,500 mature adults existing worldwide right now. So hopefully we can get those population numbers up, and then we can go to Australia and go visit the rivers and see some speartooth sharks. All right, next shark. This is the Pyjama Cat Shark. For those of you that are a little bit on the younger side, there was a huge fad over striped pajamas, and you'd wear them to bed. And so that is why they're called pajama sharks, because they have these unmistakable, beautiful stripes. And they can grow to be about 3.5 feet long at their biggest, so they're pretty small. And then I'm sure you've noticed from the middle photo here that they are so flexible that if they wanted to, they could roll up into a ball like a little roly-poly and bite their own tail. Now this is advantageous for a couple of reasons, right? So they are primarily nocturnal, and so they hide in little crevices and caves during the day, and so they're able to be really flexible and kind of shove their body wherever they possibly can. But also, if a predator were to bite their tail, well, they could turn around and bite the predator right on the nose, and hopefully that would be a useful defense mechanism, right? So you can see, yes, the bananas in pajamas show. Exactly, Kelsey. So they are what is considered endemic to the southern part of Africa. So endemic means they only live in a very specific area and a very specific habitat. So it's the same thing for the Speartooth river shark. They live in what's considered the intertidal zone, so kind of from the surface of the water down to about 300 feet. They love eating fish and invertebrates, and their absolute favorite food is cephalopods, so your octopi, squids, that kind of thing. And a concept I want to introduce here are reproductive strategies. So sharks have potential for 3 reproductive strategies. The first is viviparous, or live birth, so kind of like what mammals do. The second is oviparous, where they lay eggs outside of the body and then the eggs develop and then hatch. And the third one is ovoviviparous, where the females produce eggs inside of the body. The embryos develop within the eggs within the body. Then they hatch from the eggs within the body, and then the female gives live birth. How cool is that? All right. Anyways, so the Pyjama Cat Shark in particular is oviparous. So they lay eggs outside of the body. This is an example of what a Pyjama Cat Shark egg looks like. They're about the size of your hand, and they're colloquially called mermaid's purses because they have this sac and then they have these trailing little bits that I'm sure you can imagine mermaid just slinging it over her shoulder and going to work like that. So they're called mermaid's purses. And a really cool thing about them is they're not cut off from the outside. So there's kind of like a very, very, very tiny mesh so water can flow through them. And the embryos are aware of the outside surroundings. So if a predator goes near the mermaid's purse, this egg casing, the embryo can sense that and it will stop moving and it will freeze until the predator passes. And there are a couple of videos I've seen online. I didn't want to put it in my presentation so you guys can go explore later. But there are videos of this happening where the embryo is moving around, doing its embryo thing in the egg sac, and then a predator comes by and it stops. And that's just, I mean, how cool is that? Yeah, it is really cool. All right, so moving on. The Pyjama Cat Shark is considered to be near threatened. So they're not within those 3 high risk categories. So they're doing all right. And the reason for this is because they are an endemic species. So they're limited to a certain habitat. They're also sometimes taken for the aquarium trade because they are so pretty and they're so small. And sometimes they're fished as bycatch and sometimes they're sport fishing. But the really good thing about Pyjama Cat Sharks is that they are very hardy species. So they are like the miniature tanks of the ocean, right? So there's a really, really, really high post-capture survival rate. So they're doing okay. All righty. So we're going to be moving on. This is a really fun one. This is the Winghead Shark, right? And I'm sure you guys immediately notice how big the hammer is on this. It's a kind of hammerhead shark. And the technical term for the hammer in hammerhead is cephalofoil. And the cephalofoil in the winghead shark can be 40 to 50% the length of the body. So about half as wide as it is long. which is crazy. And you can really see that in this photo over here on the right side with the guy's hand on the shark. And you can see how long the cephalofoil is in comparison to the rest of the body, right? And so this long cephalofoil, their eyes are actually on either end, right? So they're over here in this picture at the bottom, and they're over here. And that gives them superb binocular vision. So we also have binocular vision because we have two eyes. So if you cover one of your eyes and you only try looking with one eye, you really don't have a lot of depth perception. You can't tell how close or how far things are as well as you can with two eyes looking at it. The winghead shark has enhanced depth perception because their eyes are so far apart. Their huge cephalofoil also helps them hunt some of their favorite fish and crustaceans and cephalopods, and they can be a maximum of about 6 feet, but they're generally between 4 and 5 feet, but that means that their cephalofoil can be a maximum of 3 feet across. How crazy is that? They live in the Indo-Pacific, around corals, coastal habitats, and they also live in estuaries, which again is brackish water. So not as salty as the ocean, not as fresh as a river or freshwater. So they also have an ability to osmoregulate very well and kind of maintain their internal body environment. Now, the winghead shark is viviparous, so it is a live birth. And I'm sure you guys are thinking, how in the world is this shark coming out of its mother, right? Well, I have the answer, thankfully. So 2 things. They go out tail first, but that doesn't really answer your questions. In the womb, in the uterus, the wing is soft and pliable and it is folded alongside the body. And so when they're born, they go tail first, and as soon as they emerge, their wing expands and then hardens. How cool is that? Oh, I think it's just incredible what nature has created, you know? So unfortunately, as amazing as these sharks are, they are considered endangered, and that's because they have been traditionally exploited for their fins and for their meat. So all hammerhead sharks have this gorgeous, huge, sickle-shaped, so like this, dorsal fin. And unfortunately, that is often targeted for the fin trade and for shark fin soup. So unfortunately, there aren't a lot of regulations in the areas that they live, but they are currently working on some policies and conservation for this species because we want to make sure that they stay around as long as possible. And I'm just seeing in the chat that Kelsey commented, sounds like a cartoon, baby comes out in the head, goes boing, and that is exactly how I also imagine it to happen, so well done. All right. Moving on. So the next shark is, well, the next cartilaginous friend is the bowmouth guitarfish. And I corrected myself because this is actually a ray. Even though it kind of looks like a complete 50% between a ray and a shark, right? They're actually colloquially called, a lot of the common names are shark ray. Makes sense, right? So the really cool thing about them is that they swim like a shark. So they use their caudal fin or their tail to propel themselves forward, whereas rays use their pectoral fins to move. But this one uses its back caudal fin like a shark. They can get to be about 9 feet long, so they get to be pretty big. And they are an inshore species, so they live pretty close to the surface and don't really go below 200 feet. They also, you can see in the photo on the bottom left, they have these thorny ridges on their head and on their face and on their shoulders, and these are used as a defense mechanism. So they can thrash around and hit you with those thorny ridges and make very quick work of you. Unfortunately, because they live so close to the surface, they're often caught in nets. And these thorns, when they're thrashing around, can cut the nets. And so the fishermen are upset that their nets are now broken. And so it's not really as good of a deal as it could be. Unfortunately, I forgot to put that up. The thorny ridges on the head to defend themselves. Unfortunately, the bowmouth guitarfish is considered critically endangered. And that is because they are targeted by artisanal and commercial fishing. Artisanal or artisanal, depends on who's saying it. That is when you are fishing for your livelihood in like a village. It's not commercial fishing, but like a local fisherman would be artisanal fishers. So they're caught as bycatch in that. But unfortunately, they are largely targeted for their fins because I'm sure you can see from this photo, they just have gorgeous, huge dorsal fins, 2 huge dorsal fins. They have pelvic fins on either side, and their caudal fin is also huge. So unfortunately, in this photo over here on the right, you can see that this shark has already been harvested for its fins, and it's really sad, but it is a reality. And the point of me telling you all of this is that so you guys learn about what's happening, you guys are aware, and then you can spread information, more people can learn, and we can kind of try to get some policies built in the areas of the world that need them the most. All right. They have, however, had some minor success in breeding these in captivity. I don't know if you can tell, but these 2 photos, the one in the middle and on the left, those are from aquariums. Those are not from the wild. But they have had some minor success breeding them in captivity at the Newport Aquarium in Kentucky, of all places. So people know about this species, and they are working very hard to kind of bring them back. And hopefully one day we'll be able to get them into a viable population in the wild. All right. So this is the Brandel Shark. This is my new favorite shark. I personally learned about this shark on Monday, I think, Monday or Tuesday, and I just went nuts because I think this is the coolest shark ever. I don't know if you guys can tell, I'm sure you can by looking at the pictures, but their skin is covered in spikes. And that is because their dermal denticles, or their tiny skin teeth, it's kind of their version of scales or skin. On most shark species, they're very small and they overlap and they form a really, really thin, thick, hard layer. On Brandel sharks, they have much fewer and much sparser dermal denticles, but they form patches of spikes. How cool is that? I cannot believe that something like this is real. It just absolutely blew my mind. And this species of shark employs a tactic called counter shading. So they're kind of a brownish, blackish, metallic, purplish hue on the top, and they're lighter on the bottom. So this allows, if they are coming from the bottom and looking at prey above them, their dark top is showing, and that blends in with the dark bottom. If they are the prey and a predator is looking at them from below, they're lighter on the bottom, and in theory that will blend in with the lighter surface on top. So that's called counter shading, and it makes them kind of, I don't want to say invisible, but a little bit. I'm hearing something beep. Not very pretty looking. No, they're not, but that's okay. Not all sharks are beautiful, but I think they're fascinating. And they live in the deep, deep sea, right? So 400 to 800 meters, which is about 1,300 to 3,000 feet. And the deepest they've ever been observed is, sorry, I'm hearing an alarm and I'm trying to figure out where it's coming from. The deepest they've been observed at is 4,000 feet. And they can grow up to about 10 feet long, and then their skin is covered in what has been described as a foul-smelling mucus. I think that's really cool. It's a couple millimeters thick. This can be used for a variety of purposes, for their immune system, for defense, and probably some other purposes that we don't know about because we just don't have enough information on them. They have a sister species called the prickly shark. So it's the Brandel shark and the prickly shark. And I'm sure you've noticed that I don't have any live or ocean photos of them. That's because they've never been photographed in the wild. But the prickly shark has been, and so they look really, really similar to the prickly shark over here in the blue. Two major differences between the Brandel shark and the prickly shark is that the prickly shark doesn't have the same big spikes or thorns on their body. All of their dermal denticles are very small, but they do all point out. So it's just a lot of very, very tiny spikes instead of really big spikes. So that's why they're called prickly sharks instead of bramble sharks. And then the other big difference is you can see on the bramble shark in the middle here, it has two small dorsal fins. And on the prickly shark, it has one large dorsal fin. So that's really the main way of telling them apart from a distance, if you were to ever see them, which is very unlikely because they live so deep. And the other really, really cool thing about this shark is that they are ovoviviparous. So this is where the female has eggs inside her, the embryos develop in the eggs, then the baby sharks hatch from the eggs inside the uterus, and then it's live birth, which is just, I think, the coolest thing ever. And this shark, the Brandel shark, is considered data deficient by the IUCN. There's just not enough information out there on these sharks because they are so rare and they live in such deep water that humans almost never see them. So that's kind of, they don't really have enough information to provide a rank or a grade. All right. Now, the last shark I will be sharing with you today is the ninja lanternshark. Excellent name, excellent name. So this shark was actually discovered for the very first time in 2015, 5-6 years ago. And you can see that they have black skin. They're very small. And their black skin is covered in these special cells called photopores, which allow them to emit a very faint glow. And you can see it in this kind of artistic rendition. This is not an actual photograph. And these are some, I don't really remember what kind of image it is, but it shows that they can emit this faint glow. So essentially, this camouflages them in the dark. So they live quite deep, and because of their black skin and the very, very faint glow they emit, they're essentially invisible because the water around them is black, just like their skin, but a little bit of light can penetrate to the depths in which they live. So they blend in with the background. And so that is why they're called the ninja lantern shark. They get to be only about 19 inches or about half a meter long. And you can see that they have these beautiful, huge eyes in relation to their body size. Now, if you look at the center of the eye, you can kind of see a reflection that's blue. So the eyes glow a little bit, but they also have this really cool blue reflection from the back of the eye, which is called the retina. Innovacion, yes, they do live close to you in Costa Rica and Panama. Their eyes have this, this blue reflection because that is the only kind of wavelength or color of light that can penetrate all the way down to where they live. If you were looking at a different shark, like a juvenile lemon shark, for example, they live in really shallow mangrove habitats, kind of in murkier, greener waters. And if you were to shine a light at the back of their eye, it would look green because that's the wavelength of light that they can absorb and see the most. Okay. Unfortunately, the IUCN doesn't even have this species listed. It is way too new, again, only discovered in 2015, and there's just not enough data. Only 8 specimens of this shark have ever been seen. Kelsey asks, they have very tiny teeth, what do they eat? I am not really sure. I'm guessing they eat other small fish and potentially krill and crustaceans, kind of anything they can find down in the depths. They don't have a lot of information on these sharks because only 8 of these specimens have ever been found. You can look at the map in the bottom right-hand corner. They're only found along the western coast of Costa Rica and Panama so far, from what we know. But yeah, I'm sure if you did a little bit of searching, you might be able to find what kind of diet they have. I'm just not sure. and I don't want to give you any wrong information. So unfortunately, that's the end of my talk. So I would love for you guys to put in the chat which of these sharks or cartilaginous friends like the bowmouth guitarfish is your favorite, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. I love the guitarfish. How cool is that one? It's so beautiful. Yes, Brandel Shark. Virginia asks, how many shark pups in a litter? That is extremely dependent on the species. Some species might only birth like 1 or 2 or 5 pups, and some might have 50 pups in a litter. It depends on the reproductive strategy. So either they're live birth, producing eggs, or they're ovoviviparous, so the eggs are inside the body and then they hatch and then they give live birth. So it really does depend on the species. Are there specific breeding seasons for most sharks? Kelsey asked that. Yes. So, and it's not all sharks breed in the same season, and different sharks have different gestation periods. So for example, the Pyjama Cat Shark, their eggs are produced and laid every couple of months, so they can breed roughly once a year. Other sharks, I don't remember off the top of my head. I think tiger sharks have a really long gestational period, like over a year, so they might only be able to breed once every 2 years or once every 3 years or something like that. My mom asks, where does the pug shark live? It lives in your house. Thank you for the question. Jackson, thank you. The Speartooth Shark and the Ninja Lanternshark. Yes, those are so cool. I was so excited to share all these super cool sharks with you guys. And some of them I had literally never heard of until this week, so. Rowan says the spiny dogfish gestates for 2 years. Exactly, so it really depends on the season and the species of shark. Annie asks, do we know how far down the Ninja Lanternshark lives? Not off the top of my head, but we can say that it's very deep, right? So I think these specimens, the 8 specimens of the lantern shark that were caught in nets. So I don't think they really ever saw them at the depth that they live at. So there are guesses out there, but I don't think there's a really definitive answer for you. Any other questions, guys?
Cool.
Oh, thank you, guys.
We'll hang out for a little bit longer. And maybe a couple more questions will come through, but wanted to let everybody that's here know I'm going to throw our signups for next week's speakers in your chat box if you're interested. Mugda is going to be presenting next week on deep sea ecology. So some of those like sharks that live in the depths and we don't know how deep and what they eat, that might be really cool. And then Katie O'Donnell is also going to be presenting, and she's going to be talking about fisheries. So we learned a little bit about bycatch and why it's important to eat sustainable seafood, and Katie O'Donnell is going to go further into that next week. And if you're not already getting our newsletters, I'll throw a link to sign up for that in the chat as well. You'll be able to grab the recording of today's session from that newsletter, as well as some cool activities and things to do related to the theme of the week. But yeah, we'll hang out a little bit longer. If you've got to go, we totally understand. Thank you so much, Elana. This is so fun.
Thank you. All right, I do see a couple more questions in the chat box. Oh my goodness, you just put a bunch in there.
Sorry.
It's okay, let me scroll back up. Kelsey asked what my favorite shark is. The short answer is the nurse shark. I love nurse sharks so much. All of my friends know that I love nurse sharks. I love it so much that I have it tattooed on my body. Ask your parents before getting a tattoo. I did. I love the nurse shark. I think they're so cool and they're so cute, and they're also really kind of, they're like the big tanks of the sea. Like they're really hardy. And then my new favorite shark. So the nurse is my all-time favorite shark. My new favorite shark is the Brandel Shark for sure. I just think that's amazing. So cool. Zane asks where I went to college. So I did my undergrad at the University of Miami. And I also just finished my master's degree also at the University of Miami at the Rosenstiel School. So that's kind of a marine and atmospheric specific graduate school. So I've done all of my higher education in Miami. Annie asks, what are some other resources that we can use to learn more about sharks besides the IUCN? I recommend sharksandrays.org. Off the top of my head, I mean, there are a lot of really good resources for sharks. If you want to learn about sharks in a specific region of the world, you can always type into Google sharks of the Northwest Atlantic. And they usually have a government or NGO website that lists them, and you can get links to them, and you can kind of go on like a Google deep dive of all these really cool shark species. So sharksandrays.org for sure. Yeah, and there are also some really good books out there that have a lot of information. But the funny thing about books and print is that, I mean, we're discovering new sharks every year, right? So they constantly have to be updated. So don't go reading a shark book from 1986, right? Go look for the most recent ones you can find. All right. Let me see if there are any questions. Annika asks, sorry, I hope it's Annika. What got you interested in sharks? So, funny story, I fell in love with sharks while I was a Broadreach student. And the instructor on my boat, I went to the Caribbean and I did the marine biology voyage, the very same voyage that I was supposed to teach this summer. I'm very sad that I wasn't able to do that. But my marine biology instructor showed me a documentary called Shark Water. And that kind of opened my eyes to the world of sharks. You know, I had always wanted to be a marine biologist. That was kind of a constant. But I never really knew what I wanted to focus on. You know, save the whales, save the corals. And so after I saw this documentary, I was like, save the sharks. And so I kind of stuck with that, and I'm a shark biologist now. Jackson, thank you. Jackson Hooten, a colleague of mine, he suggests Sharks of the World, that I think is both an online and print resource for learning about sharks. Isabel asks, where are your favorite places to dive or snorkel with sharks? South Africa. I spent a little bit of time in South Africa, and I was able to do cageless dives with oceanic blacktips, and and also the Bahamas. I was there about a year ago, and I got to do dives with lemon sharks and Caribbean reef sharks and nurse sharks and bull sharks and tiger sharks, and it's just a really, really amazing warm water place to dive and snorkel with sharks. Any other questions, you guys? Absolutely, you can email me with questions. Virginia, should I put my email in the box, in the chat? Is that okay?
Sure. If you want to throw your email in there, that's fine.
Yeah.
You all can also always reach out to brhq@gobroadreach.com, and we can also find, we can send it to Elana and Lindsay and some of our other marine biologists. If you're curious, we love to hear from you guys.
I love talking about sharks, in case you guys couldn't tell. So if you guys want to email me questions, I am more than happy to answer any of your questions. Invasion asks, what are my top 3 favorite sharks? Nurse shark, Brandel shark. I don't know. I love all sharks the same. I don't know. Maybe one I'll go, so those are my top 2, and then one I haven't seen but really, really, really want to see is a whale shark. I am dying to go snorkeling and diving with whale sharks, so I'll have that as my answer. All right.
Cool.
Yes, thank you, Joseph. I'm always wearing a mask.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to go ahead and close our meeting down, but of course, always email us, and it sounds like Elana's happy to answer questions over email too. We hope we'll see you back next week for some of our other presentations.
Thank you guys so much. Bye.
Bye.